Puhutaanko suomea vai englantia? English, please.
Yeah.
Works well. Welcome everyone. And happy Women's Day.
Thanks, Michelle.
I've never hosted an event, to be honest, so this is learning for me as well. And what I was thinking that we have really great speakers here, so that what we could do is to go 15 to some whatever time you want to share with us your thoughts, and then we no need to mikä on viittaaminen englanniksi?
Refer.
Yeah, so then afterwards
Oh, so you mean like this?
niin ettei tarvi viitata sitten. So let's have an open discussion about the topic, and it would be really great to hear everyone's thoughts and just be like home, I would say. Not like in a school in a way we're used to be, since the EdTech Hack is about creating the school of the future. So now it's our chance to do it our way. And then one ask I have for you, since we have Okko Koppola here. What's up? Joo.
I'm good. Thank you for asking.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, don't mind me, I'm going to be filming a bit today and making a little short video for the event. And yeah, have fun.
And then afterwards, at some point, it would be great to go, if you go and be interviewed by Okko Koppola. We would like to have you answer the question, what is the future of school? Don't think of like that it can't be something, it can be anything. If you want to go to the moon and learn about the space, then fine, say it. Just be a child and answer the question. So that would be really awesome. So then have everyone to answer that, and then we're also going to interview children and other people, so we'll see what would come up with that. But no more further blah blahs on my behalf. Ta-da! Would you like to share your thoughts on AI?
Thank
I.
you. I. Or
AI.
in English it's AI.
AI.
Does it mean that in Finnish it's kind of
I.
just the contrary? So I is AI.
AI. I.
So those who got the, I have been doing research on natural language processing for 30 years about now, so I'm very keen on seeing how machines do all kinds of crazy interpretations. And even I did, because then there was this question that about V-data. I wonder if you know what it means, the V-data or V. So it's to refer is one that I thought that you don't need to refer to something, and then of course it doesn't mean that, but it means that you just raise your hand, yes. But that's an example of that we humans also do errors, and we learn gradually things so that we become more knowledgeable and skillful in using language and understanding the world. And now regarding AI and how artificial intelligence...
We cannot hear you very well
Yeah,
okay.
because of the music.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
No,
Ta-da.
it's gone.
There you go.
Ah, mic is somewhere.
Onks meillä mikrofoni?
Yeah, I mean, do you think you need it, or?
It would be useful.
Well, then we just...
Because I can stand up
There's the
and
catch
look,
box like right there.
but I think it's more relaxing.
That's like a microphone. You can put in your hand.
Miten tää toimii?
Ah, okay. Yes.
The top is a
We'll see.
microphone.
Not yet.
Siri, turn on the microphone. En mä osaa käyttää tätä.
It's this one. Or do you want to have the Dropbox?
Yeah, it could be.
If it works.
That's fine too, if
So
it works.
This one works, yes.
Can we have
Okay.
both?
So the only
That's
thing...
for the audience, yes.
Yeah. So the only problem with this one is that it sometimes makes a very unpleasant sound. So it,
This one or
no, not this one, the box.
okay.
So it might be easier if
Yeah.
if you just don't risk it.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
So we kind of started considering language as something. So if we think about the kind of skills and abilities that artificial intelligence systems have, so they are very many, and of course one thing that we have had already for some time is that the collection of texts or whatever facts or views on the world, so when they are in digital form, so it's more and more questionable, is it useful to somehow try to remember things, and in practice there has been quite a difference already. So at school this has been kind of seen that even without AI, just the normal digital means, so it helps us to remember and find things without the kind of ability or the kind of effort of learning to know and knowing by remembering things. And that's one crucial change, of course. And then what is important is our ability to use knowledge and use the kind of what we have available. And what is the kind of frightening and useful thing regarding AI? More and more things are such that the human skills, intellectual abilities are being modeled by the computers in such a way that even problem solving and such things are becoming available through the boxes that we have in our pockets. And that means that in the future it's really crucial to think what is the essential thing to be learned at school. But I would start from a very positive thing, because the world is far from ready and there's a huge number of different problems in the world, so we have more resources and capacity to do things. So I wouldn't say that people are somehow useless in the future. On the contrary, all the problems we have in the world, we have just better chances to devote ourselves to do those things, and many other things are kind of coming for us automatically. Then it's just a question of how we organize ourselves. But let's consider, for example, language as an example. I've been writing this book, Peace Machine, in Finnish, and now it's just being translated almost this moment in the US to English, and then hopefully in Chinese and Russian and Japanese and some other languages.
Same.
That would be nice. Actually, I would be happy about that. One of my colleagues in the conference where I'm now on digital humanities actually said that one point of view into languages is to consider them all to be the one, so that we have actually one language, but there are different variants of it. Because if you go from place to another, so actually the languages kind of change their nature. So the Finnish spoken in eastern or northern or western Finland, it's not the same language exactly, but people just understand each other well enough. If we go to southern Sweden, those of us who reasonably understand Swedish, so we understand Swedish spoken in Stockholm, but in Malmö, so that's actually already quite a challenge. And then the Swedish, so to say, spoken in Denmark is already very difficult to understand. But if they had a common army, they would call it the same language. So that's one definition for language. But so I have recommended, for example, regarding languages, the following. If and when, and almost now, we have the boxes that translate things so fluently that we start not to be, we don't need actually foreign languages, because we just listen to our system that translates whatever someone is saying in any of at least 50 or 100 different languages, and we can hear it in our mother tongue. So even English becomes to be obsolete in the sense that we don't need to study English in order to be able to be internationally connected. What does it mean? It doesn't mean that we would be studying only our mother tongue, because that's something we need. We need at least one language more, and for two reasons. We need to keep us healthy, because if we are having only one language in our mind and in our kind of skill set, we are actually going to die maybe 5 or 10 years. I don't say this scientifically because I can't cite the actual article, but there are articles quite recently that point out that if we are not dying, but at least our brain is not working as well as if we have been studying at least 2 languages. And there's another thing that is important in learning languages. It's the fact that languages model the world differently. So that if we understand English, if we use Finnish, if we use German, if we use French, if we use Japanese, Chinese, whichever language in the world, linguists usually say that there's something like 7,000 languages, but it's, as said, it's kind of relative number, so there are many more dialects, etc. So that means that in order to understand that the world is different for different people, we need to know other languages. And I have recommended that in the future it wouldn't be, for example, in Finland, it wouldn't be Finnish or Swedish only, but it would be some language around which would be motivated. But it doesn't need to be English, because English, Finnish, Finnish, English will be more or less automatic in 10 years from now, 20 years from now. Our children that are born now, they will be having better interpreters than we are ourselves. So in that sense, the systems are really overwhelmingly good in the future, because when they can simulate the skills of very professional people who are translating and interpreting. But it means that for our own benefit, for our health and for the ability to understand the world better, because we are quite limited in our understanding of the world if we only know our mother tongue, because that means that we have only the conceptual system that is kind of built around that language. And each language actually makes the world to look different, because the conceptual divisions and conceptual structures in different languages, they are quite different. In some cases, they are really substantially different. And that has been studied for a long time already. And that means that we are more cultured, cultivated, more understandable. We have better skills to understand the world around us if we study also languages. And that's why I have proposed that rather than learning Finnish, English, Swedish, German, French, whatever, we study, for example, Finnish, here in Finland, Swedish, in case that's convenient. And then we can study something, if we like Swedish, English, German, French, Spanish, whatever, some nearby language which makes sense as if you kind of like some language based on just the motivation. And the third language would be kind of more or less obligatory, would be some distant language, some Asian, African, whatever language that is spoken by some thousands of people, which would be a contribution to the humankind. So the civilization would thank for the effort, because then those languages are such that there are only such small number of speakers that it makes sense actually for humans to make the effort, because the linguistic skills of machines are purely dependent on the human contributions. So the data that is being collected and some multi-layer neural network that simulates our brain functioning, so then it works only if there is enough data available. And those languages which are rare, so they don't have that situation, and that's why actually our children and youngsters and who wants to do that can make that kind of contribution to the world and its cultures. So in that sense, that's the current situation, is that we are having such methodology around us that in some 20 years from now, it's really changing the kind of context in which we operate, and which also tells or kind of points out that we have to really carefully think what is the kind of things that are sensible to be learned. And there it seems that in the long term, one important thing is that how do we actually do in ourselves and with each other. So I would say that the way of relating to each other is actually something which is important. So in a way that we can have all kinds of facts around us, all very refined reasoning, for example, in medicine, medical kind of profession, but then the question is that how do we apply it? And that means that, for example, emotional aspects, so that we actually consider each other in an empathetic way. So empathy is one important issue, so that in the case we want to build a good society and the world, so empathy is one of the key issues here, and all kinds of moral considerations. So in that sense we come back to basics. And 2000 years ago, somewhere, for example, there in the southern Europe, there were people who were slaves. And now what is nice nowadays in the world, that there's less and less slaves. It's pity that there are still somewhere, but we have this nice situation that these digital and other machineries that we have around, they can be kind of like our slaves. And even though there are some who say that machines will be conscious and so on, I find it quite problematic idea, because only living creatures are conscious in a serious way. And for example, one quick comment on that, some people like to think about that we could be kind of stored in digital form and we would be living forever. I'm very doubtful. We could of course discuss that issue for an hour, but just as a short remark, so that there are very profound reasons why it seems that we won't be storing our consciousness in a digital form, even in the long future. But maybe, as this could be continuing for a very long time, but I would like to have a chance to have the others also to discuss here and discuss with you here. So maybe final comment on learning things. So about learning skills, so I would like to take two examples. So it has been obvious for at least 20 or at least, let's say, 15 years that robotic cars will be here in the future. So 1 million people die every year in traffic accidents, and whether people are drunken or all kinds of reasons for that, but the cars will be driving much better themselves than we can do. Even in the average we do quite well, but kind of the extremes, so we will have, and they are only, I would say that philosophically there are some comments on that the robot needs to choose that it does.
Yeah, whether
It hits
the
10.
cursor or the...
Yes, so it's a bit theoretical. So the essential questions are elsewhere. So do a billion people die, or can we make it less to 10,000 people or whatever? And then when 10,000 people die in robotic cars, there will be many angry people saying that now you have created a monster. Even
Maybe
though
we
we
could
say
like more.
yes, but anyway, we save many. And another thing which saves very many people is that medical doctors won't make the diagnosis anymore in the future. Already now it's close to be doubtful that the medical doctors would actually, if they are not highly educated and experienced specialists, they still are better than the machines. But we are coming to a situation where the doctors are not making that work, because if we have a box that can make the diagnosis based on the experience and skills based on million doctors, so then one doctor simply can't compete in that situation. But that doesn't mean that the doctor would be without work, but he or she is an organizer, so more like a strategic person there in between. And then again, empathy becomes much more, and communication skills and so on, the presence and ability to kind of organize the processes related to this. So there are more opportunities, more challenges too, but the kind of skills that we need to learn are are another kind, and that will lead into a, I would say, prosperous world rather than something which is bad for us. But that requires very careful thinking and very good decisions.
Any questions, thoughts?
I have a question. Thank you so much. So many interesting threads of thoughts. I have lots of questions, but I'm also a linguist. I think for this context, it's interesting if you can speak a little bit about AI and app development. How do you think that AI will affect app development or coding in the future? Is this something?
Yes, the question is about AI and application or software development. And it's extremely important because software coding has remained the same in practice for almost always. So of course there has been all kinds of new programming languages and all kinds of features which have changed the situation even considerably, but the underlying architecture is quite similar, so that so-called third generation programming languages are still the main things, and then there are all kinds of features and object-orientedness, functional languages, etc., etc. But in some sense it's still quite the same, and then there are some on top of that. There are the layers like relational databases and the languages that are made for that, and there were those AI languages which were symbolic reasoning, but they were kind of dead end because the world around is not a set of statements, but it's really much more complicated. But this could be discussed actually for a long time because it's a very interesting question. And if I had 99 lives, I would like to use one of those for this particular question actually, because it seems that machine learning and pattern recognition will change the whole thing quite considerably. So that operating system, first of all, will change. It will be a slow thing because the changing operating system completely will be a tough thing, but it will be when the human level skills in computers are available and the performance is, let's say, 1,000,000 times faster or something, it makes sense to really make. So then the question is that how do we do things so that we are actually respectful and we learn the skills of being kind of human in a proper way. And I think there's good time. Of course, young children are in the primary position there, and I wouldn't take too much things into digital direction, but it's kind of happens by itself. But then it's the question of adults to be kind of there to understand the situation and not feel afraid or frightened by the fact that there are such systems that change the overall situation.
Good answer. Yeah. And maybe from there, does somebody want to say something?
I guess my intuition here is that the timing is such that we continue and go further.
Social. What was the word?
Yeah.
You can easily jump in and now.
Yeah, thank you, Timo. And thank you, Metka, for having me here. Hi, nice to meet you all. My name is Juha, and I come from Mightyfire. Mightyfire is a Finnish startup and focusing on enhancing social emotional skills and character strengths. And, well, I was thinking about telling you something about Mightyfire and about the how do we add the digital world into preschool or comprehensive school classrooms. But on the other hand, when I listened to Timo here, I was thinking about maybe first asking you a question. Do you know what is the most common profession in US, in Western Europe, almost in every country in Western Europe and in US at the moment. What is the most common profession at the moment?
Developer.
Teacher.
Really? I mean,
Developer.
developer? Okay. Think a little bit like outside of your own box. What do you think that most of the
Farmer.
Sorry?
Farmer.
Farmer? Okay.
Not anymore.
No.
Not anymore.
Not anymore? Yeah.
Barber.
Barber? Now we are going like
Unemployed.
Waiter.
now we are going a little bit closer. Could be, yeah. It's actually actually a driver driving something, driving a truck or a car or a taxi or being a Volt driver or delivery guy or something like that. So driver is the most common profession at the moment in the US and in most Western Europe countries. Then on the other hand, like you said, transportation is going through enormous change at the moment. And what Kirsi was saying there, that we don't know how world or our kids are, or which kind of world our kids are going to grow up, but that could be a quite accurate prediction that, for example, I have a 4-year-old son at the moment, and he is not necessarily going to get a driving license anymore. I mean, at least kids who are going to born now or in 2020, they are most likely not going to get a driving license anymore. Driving is going
Maybe
to change.
a drone license if they fly with.
Could be something like that. On the other hand, kids who are going to born now or in 2020 or something like that, they are going to face a situation that they are not anymore when they are attending college or university or they are joining the workforce. They are not anymore probably the most intelligent entity in the world. I mean, artificial intelligence is probably going to, I mean, we are going to have university lecturers or doctors or whatever. They are going to be artificial intelligence machines or something like that. Our kids, or at least my kids and my future, hopefully future kids, they are not necessarily going to be anymore when they go to the university. They are not going to be the smartest ones in there as a humans. They could be something else. On the other hand, I was asked to speak about social emotional learning and how is that, or let's put it this way. In Finland we have quite always understood that the overall student well-being is a key to good learning outcomes. That necessarily is not the same thing around the world. But luckily, in other countries they have realized also that the academic performance is not only about how many hours you spend on learning math or languages or anything like that, but if you want to improve your learning outcomes, you have to improve the overall student well-being. And the key element there is to create a socially and emotionally stable and safe learning environment. And how to do that is, of course, we have to educate our teachers and everyone in education business, or the teachers, principals, anyone who is there working with the young ones. That's number one. And on the other hand, like everything in education business, it's getting more digital. Like you mentioned that if something is lectured and you hear it only by once, then you have to take everything from that. But if you have that in digital form, you can always go back and so on and so on. So, for example, learning social interactions and enhancing your emotional skills also is something that needs to be done in future throughout the digital application or some other form. Because let's face it, everything is digital at the moment, so we can't kind of take something out of that and just hope that it's going to stay that way. However, and also based on the things that I'm going to next say, I mean, if you think about why do we generally, like, let's be straightforward. I mean, we educate our students so they could have as good profession and join the workforce and be good citizens. But on the other hand, if we think about joining the workforce, and we have three dimensions, we have the physical, the cognitive, and the emotional in every workplace. And artificial intelligence and machines have overtaken already the two. They have beaten us in the physical work dimension. They do most of our hard labor, and they have beaten us in a cognitive way as well. I mean, artificial intelligence is already in use in medicine, for example, and the only dimension that we still have left is the emotional, and that's why, for example, OECD has risen social intelligence in one of the top 10 skills in the future for 2020. And so, in order to make sure that our kids in the future would have the best social emotional skills and has the best capability to have social interactions, we have to have some kind of learning material and devices designed for that as well. And Mightyfire is designed to enhance social emotional skills, and we are a relatively young startup. We already have 15,000 users. Half of them comes from Finland and half mainly from Asia, but all around the world. However, of course, we need more, and I think that's the reason that you have organized this EdTech Hack. And the key element here is that we have to, whether it's related to social emotional learning or whether it's learning natural science skills or anything, we have to make the learning environment approved by the students. We can't create something that is good in our head, but we have to have the answers from the end users. Like in any service, I mean, we are not, as an adult, we are not suitable for using a service if that's designed by someone who doesn't have any clue about that. So that the same thing goes with the educational services. We have to be able to create something in cooperation with the students and of course the teachers, because the teachers are a key element in creating a good learning environment, whether they are called in the future teachers or mentors or whatever. Yeah. I don't know. I try to be relatively fast because, like I said, I have a 4-year-old who's waiting for me to.
Daddy, where are you?
Yeah, Daddy, where are you?
Calling you in the phone.
I just received some pictures that they are having a pizza day already today, so I'm sure that they are enjoying themselves there with the mom. But anyway, yeah, I'm more than happy to have a chat with you or answer the questions related to social emotional learning and creating a startup or anything. We just were talking with Niklas over there from Germany School about the situation that I've been born in 1978, so my childhood and teenage life has been totally analogic, but the time that I have been working or studying in the university has been already digital, and I think it's called Xennial or something like that. The situation when you have kind of lived half and half.
Yeah, I heard that too.
Yeah, other than, for example, Niklas, who has lived all his life in the kind of the nowadays digital world. But anyways, yeah, social and emotional learning and creating a safe learning environment is I think it's crucial in order to have the best learning outcome in any subject, whether it's math or English or anything. Yeah, great. Thanks.
Do you want to just continue? Does somebody want to share thoughts or?
Super important.
Yeah. Too many emails.
Yeah, well, that's going on. So how
you're gonna see all
I wasn't too familiar with this event, but Mary, one of the organizers, heard me talking at a different event. Yeah, that was about designing for children and children's safety in digital services. What I do is I'm a designer and developer, so I actually build a lot of digital services and stuff like that throughout my day, and also more and more I'm starting to teach people to do the same. So the talk that I gave then was about like how these things are actually built. So I realized that not a lot of people in the room actually knew about how these things were built, and hopefully I'm going to give you some insight into that as well.
Is it this one?
Yeah, that's it.
Good.
Yeah, it's pretty simple. I made them like on the bus here, so yeah.
I like the skateboard.
Yeah, you'll understand why it's there like right after.
Do you
Yeah, I can just like press. I can switch places with you.
Yeah, we'll do
This
that.
one. So yeah, before I can kind of continue, I have to introduce a concept. It's called an MVP, which stands for minimum viable product. So how services used to be built is there would be a huge amount of research, and then the designers would build something, and then it would go into development, take a couple of months, and a huge product would be built and then shipped out. But these days, the model has changed with something called minimum viable product. So startups design in very small sprints, a couple of weeks to a month. Like you design something quick, you get it out, test with users, and then you improve on it constantly, and that's how stuff is built. If I had to give an analogy, it's so instead of in your company first designing a wheel and then figuring out how to connect it and then building a car with it and then that kind of stuff, and then realizing you need windshields, you start building like a small version of your solution, then you move on to something with a bit more features and a bit more features. So this is actually one of the most common pictures shown to learning digital designers and developers. But so I'll kind of ask you, now that you've heard of this concept, what do you think a minimum viable product for a digital service should include? What do you think is taught to designers and developers? Any quick thoughts? Like, just shout it out. Like, if not, I'll start pointing at people.
Well, I think it should have, well, it depends what you're aiming for, whatever you're building, that it has the key elements to reach the goal.
Yeah. Any other things?
Nice colors.
Sure. Okay. I'll move on quickly because I guess time is limited. But so the most common answers and what is taught in university is you have to have a critical hypothesis. So one question that you have in your head, that an experiment that you're doing. So for example, if you're building, how many of you know what Tinder is? Yeah? Okay, if you're building like a Tinder for grandmas, yeah? Your most common, the critical hypothesis is grandmas use smartphones and download apps. So you want to test that. So you build a really small thing and you don't need, before you even build, you go to 20 nursing homes and then you just see how many of those grandmas have smartphones. And you've answered your most important question. So before you build anything, you've answered the question. Then your next step would be, okay, so what kind of apps do they use? So you see what they have on their home screen. And that's like asking these quick questions saves you a lot of time later on, and also embarrassing costly mistakes. Next thing is exactly what you said. So the main core of what you're building. So if you're building a new social network, you don't have to be Facebook right off the bat. You have something special, like for example, Instagram had images, yeah? So you make it the best solution for uploading and sharing images, and don't worry about the rest. You launch it, people start putting stuff in, and then you build the rest out. The next thing is, like, as you said, colors, basic aesthetics, so make it look decent. And people say build it fast and build it lean, so like exactly what I'm saying, like go do it really quickly. But one thing that's missing, and that's the reason for many crises, is basic user safety features. And like I've been going through many different people's classes, I've taught myself, I've learned in my company, like when they have trainings. Almost no developer or designer is taught a standard set of safety features or things that are checklist of stuff that you have to do, which is the reason why when artificial intelligence is implemented, there will be a couple of crises. It's coming. Like there's going to be a point where like it does something bad, and that's because the people who are building this, mostly don't learn from school. Like, for example, I work as a designer. I've consulted for companies all across Helsinki. I never actually went to any university that was related to designing or development. My main degree is technically business, but I never attended any business courses either. So. Yeah, so the people who are building the stuff that you use have not ever gone through a checklist of stuff. Like, it should have this kind of password safety feature, it should have this kind of stuff. Which is why, just a couple of weeks ago, one of the biggest hackathons, let's use that example, one of the biggest hackathons in Helsinki, they use Google Forms to gather your passwords and stuff like that and your emails. And Google Forms store those in an Excel sheet, and a white hat hacker, so a hacker who's not malicious but penetrates companies just to let them know their weaknesses. He got into that system, got a list of all their passwords, mailed it to the hackathon organizers, and also changed all the names of their folders, just to show what he could do. And that's the kind of stuff that happens because people don't really think about this stuff. And they're not taught to do this stuff. So that leads to my next question. What are the responsibilities in a product team? So most of you work at some kind of company, you might have built something. You would have heard of head of design, CEO, CTO, all of those things. There's a new law that applies only in Europe that every company should have a data safety officer. So that's only been implemented this year, even though all of these companies have been collecting your data for years and years and years and years and years. So again, what's missing there is no responsibility for user safety. There's no one at a company whose job it is to go through stuff and check that it's safe, check that it's responsible. There's no one who loses their job. There's no one who, when there's a crisis, there's no one who's mandated to do that. So that's the next surprising thing that most people find out. Next question. What are the minimum standards of user safety? Is there anything defined? So for example, if you're building hardware, there's a very specific list of rules. If you're building toys for children, there's a very specific list of rules, like if you have something that could be swallowed, put a choking hazard warning on it. All of those things don't exist for digital service and safety products, so there are no rules. And that's one of the biggest problems. So the most common answer I get when I ask this is, they kind of know this stuff, right? So the people building and the CTO, well, they don't. In most cases, I work as a consultant, which means that I actually, we don't have our own product. We go to different companies and teach them how to kind of do stuff. And in most cases, the people who have built it were good at marketing, or they were good at developing that one specific thing, but they knew nothing about user safety. And that's something that probably in an EdTech event is something you could think about solving. Next question, who audits user safety? So who goes through products, tells you that you're not meeting these requirements, blah, 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 punishes you if there's a crisis? Any ideas? No, they cannot legally punish you, but they can take away their money, but that's after a crisis. And they can't pre-actively go through your stuff. A user can't go into a company and be like, show me your code, and I want to know if it's safe. Anyone else? Who would punish you?
Operator.
Who?
Operator.
For example.
Not really well.
Okay, fair enough.
Because
So
they are responsible about it.
So someone in government vaguely, right?
No, I mean in companies who are...
Okay, within the company there's someone who, so that answer is unfortunately also not true. Most companies don't have anyone like that, and also there's some vague idea everyone has that there's a law protecting them, but in most cases there isn't for digital services. And there's no accountability anywhere. So I could mess up really badly. There might be a court case, but I'm a student, so I'd probably get away with it. If you can't prove malicious intent, I could have sold all of your patents.
Students.
Exactly. If you want a life hack for how to get out of lawsuits, have a student on your company and blame it on him. That's the lesson I really wanted to kind of
share with
here.
everyone.
Yes, exactly. But yeah, that doesn't always work either. So it's 50-50. Depends on where you are. Last question. So where do you actually learn about this stuff? The people like me, people like you, you're considering building stuff. You're a startup developer. I'm a designer. Maybe you have an answer. Like, did you have a thing you consulted? Yeah, so the internet, like, kind of secure, like the internet operations office in Finland, they have something. Yeah. So they're kind of the internet police here, exactly. But they hit startups who have established themselves, have some amount of money, users, but most startups, 99% of startups fail. That's just truth. It's not like, that's not even like a made up